Thanks for joining us. In order to support us to produce Clancy's Kitchen, you can donate as little as €5 or $5 a month and gain access to exclusive content. Just go to www.patreon.com/Clancy's Kitchen. That's www.patreon.com/Clancy's Kitchen. Enjoy the podcast. Fáilte Rash, welcome back to Clancy's Kitchen, the podcast. And we have with us today a shanachie storyteller, a man with a great knowledge of folklore, literature of all sorts, from all countries, it would seem. A singer and, of late, also a writer, because you've written a book. Our dear friend from Dungarvan, Joe Power. Céad míle fáilte.
Good.
We're delighted to have you here, Joe.
Delighted to be here.
Yeah. So, Joe, I guess when I think of you, Joe, I think of the music sessions that you've been organising now in the past.
Yeah.
How many years? At least, I'd say going on 20, is it?
I'd say it's 30 now at this stage, yeah.
What?
Because I noticed myself, I was saying 25 years for a long time.
Yeah.
But at least for 5 years, I'd say almost certainly. So
yes.
I'd say, I don't know exact dates, but I'd say around 30 years anyway.
That is incredible. It really is.
Yeah.
And they're great sessions. And we'll talk about the singing maybe in a moment.
Yeah.
But at the beginning I said shanachie, and to me, Joe, you are the ultimate shanachie. And I'm wondering where you got your inspiration from. So as a young lad growing up in Dungarvan, would you have heard loads of stories where you told bedtime stories? Like what awakened your interest in all of this?
Well, as a young lad growing up, I can say quite clearly and honestly, because I said it so often, I heard loads of great stories in my house from my father and my mother about the family and about old characters in the area. But of course, like all children, I was bored stiff and I wasn't interested in the slightest. And like everyone I've spoken to, if I had the chance to hear those stories again now, it'd be like gold dust, because I didn't really appreciate how important all that folklore was. And that was folklore, like all the stuff that was happening to my parents and at all the houses that they went to and all the people they visited and all the friends they knew. So I wasn't influenced as such by that kind of storytelling, although of course that's real storytelling anyway, because everyone, as I said earlier, I was very influenced by a series in, I said, probably the 70s. Right. It was called The Naked City.
Okay.
And it was set in New York, but there was a completely different story every week. But I always remember the slogan in the beginning was, there are 9 million stories in the Naked City. This is one of them.
Wow.
And I remember thinking that had a huge effect on me, because I said, yeah, you're right. Every person in the city has at least one story. Even they have more than one story, but they have at least one story. That's the story of their own lives. Like.
Yes.
So everyone in the city or everyone in any town has a story. So I remember that had a huge influence on me. But I'd say probably the largest influence on me was because he used to be on the television. Actually, there was two guys who used to be on the television, Jimmy O'Dea and but especially Eamon Kelly.
Oh.
And Eamon Kelly actually was a
Did he do
shanachie.
something called In My Father's Time? Was that Eamon Kelly?
My Father's Time.
Yeah, go on, give us a bit of that.
I was completely taken by him and by the Kerry accent. And since then, a lot of storytellers and shanachies, who shall be nameless, even in this area, have actually given out to me, because shanachie should do everything in his own voice.
Yeah.
But I said, I'm not really a shanachie in the sense that I'm not like doing it the whole time.
No, pause there a second, Joe,
I'm not collecting the stories.
And just explain to me, because we have viewers in America and across the world in different countries.
Right.
So to us, shanachie, we know what we're talking about, a storyteller.
Yeah.
Give us the definition, really, of what a shanachie is.
Yeah, I will.
And I suppose it's a little bit, like, other than the fact that we've microphones in front of us. But you came in tonight, we're sitting here, by the way, with hot ports on a lovely sunny evening.
Reminds
because Joe It's your favourite drink, and you've
favourite
convinced
drink.
us all to have a hot port with a drop of lime and a spoon of sugar in it, and it's lovely. And in a sense, this in itself, I suppose, is how storytelling started. People sitting down together.
And I always say it is not a coincidence that port in English means, among other things, because of Oporto in Spain, obviously, it means port. But in Irish, it means tune, port.
Oh, of course it does.
So it's a very potent word. And even potent, it's very close to port as well.
Yeah.
But I'll explain to you exactly what a shanachie is, because you're so lucky to have one of the few people in Ireland who actually know exactly what a shanachie is.
Yes, explain to us.
Because I was just interested in it and did a bit of research on it. So the word shanachie itself doesn't give you an indication, because I'm into etymology in a big way, because if you find out the ultimate meaning, the original meaning of the word, it casts a whole different light on the meaning of the word. So if you find out the origin of the word, in other words. So the etymology of shanachie is actually from the noun, which is shanachas. And an awful lot of people don't go to the trouble of being a philologist or a linguist or an etymologist and break things up. But I immediately break things up when I hear it. So
shan meaning old.
And cos meaning turn.
Old turn.
Old turn, because every story has a turn. You twist the tale, or you twist the yarn, or you spin a yarn. But even the word a spin doctor, you should put a spin on something to make it more interesting or more effective. So a story doesn't obviously go anywhere, as we were saying about the trickster. Like a story doesn't go anywhere unless there's a change,
a twist in it.
There has to be a twist somewhere.
Okay.
But even more than that, it shows you the importance that the Shanachies had in old Ireland, and there's not many people know this now, is that the Seanachaí in the old days obviously did tell stories, and it was stories about mythology and about, but it was explaining to people what were their gods and what were their beliefs and what were their belief systems, and they might have stories of war and battles that they had fought in order to teach them how to fight again in the future. But all this was in the remit of the Seanachaí, and it was his duty. But above all things in those days, because Ireland had an oral tradition, they were Celtic, so it was against their religion to write anything down. And so they had to be able to retain everything in their head.
Memory.
All the history of the clan and the history of the battles and the history of the commanders. But above all things, this is very important, the genealogy. Because the chieftain at that moment then, he could prove that he had a right to chieftainship.
Yeah.
Because his father was such and such, and go back to Neil of the 9 hostages. And so they're all called O'Neills, but there's no point in being called an O'Neill if you can't trace your origins back to Neil of the 9 hostages, Neil ne Grilach or whatever, So that was the whole point of being an O'Neill, is that you were able to prove your lineage back along. And the English kings had the same thing in Shakespeare. In all the history plays, it was always very important to be able to prove that you had it right.
Slow down a minute just to make sure I'm getting it right, okay?
Yeah. So
from what you were saying there, like my understanding of a Seanachaí storyteller was just somebody in the community that was very good at spinning a yarn.
An entertainer.
But what you're saying there, Joe, it's almost like
they were much more important.
They were much more important. Yeah. They were almost like appointed people.
Oh, they were. And they were like a bard. A bard often, like, he did poetry, or he often played the harp, he did music. But the bard and the Seanachaí were two of the right-hand men of the chieftain.
Right.
Simply because if the chieftain did something wrong or was a bad chieftain, all it would take is for the bard or the Seanachaí to tell a story against him, and they'll rise up against him. And
he was done for.
He was done for. And so therefore...
so they had a lot of power.
No, there's a very good indication of this, or I suppose indication, or an example of this in Beowulf, in the story of Beowulf, which is from the same time as the Finnich, roughly, but it's Anglo-Saxon and it's originally Danish.
Yeah.
So it describes Beowulf or like it describes the bard of the Danes, actually reciting and playing a harp at the side of the chieftain. This is actually described, but it's very carefully described that the chieftain is on a raised dais above the people to show he's the chieftain. So it's maybe 2 feet above.
It was all about power, really.
Right, but
Game of Thrones stuff.
But no, exactly, it was always about power.
Yeah,
always, ever. So this is why I'm called Power. Power is the name, and power is the game.
Of course, to Puer.
But
do you know? Can I stop you a minute?
No. No, the important point. The important point is that the crut, which is also the same etymology as the harp.
Yes.
Okay, crit.
Yeah.
But in Danish, it was crut. But the storyteller or the bard of in the time of Beowulf, he was on his right hand side of the chieftain in the same way as you are now.
Yeah.
And he was on a raised dais as well.
Right.
But the raised dais was 1 foot and maybe 10 inches.
Right.
So there was only 2 inches between the chieftain and the bard. And that showed exactly the balance of power there.
Okay.
Is that the chieftain still had to be the chief. He had to be seen to be in control.
Yes.
But the other guy was really important. And so he was like the personal secretary of the prime minister or whatever.
Yeah. Right. Give us a taste of you are a shanachie. Give us a good old yarn that a shanachie would tell us back in the day.
And this is one of the great stories ever told, I think.
Right.
Because it has all the ingredients.
Okay.
There was this man one time living in the townland of Lyre, and his name was Gortine. He was alone there in the house, for he never married. He was too shy when he was young, and too old when he got the courage. He had a great liking for mushrooms, and he'd be out at the crack of dawn in late June, and he walking barefoot through the dewy grass. One morning, as he was going along, what happened on his toe to strike a bunch of growing rushes, and a little gold ball hopped out to him. Pure solid gold, imagine it. He put it in his pocket and brought it home. So would yourself. For wasn't it a nice little nest egg to have? For all the world, that was the time he had a stonemason in building the new chimney. And in old-fashioned hearts, it just happens there's a good fireplace here. This wasn't planned at all now. In old-fashioned hearts at the time, there was a little square cubby hole left where the woman at the house could keep her canister of tea, or the man his pipe and tobacco. Do you know, says Gortine, that Róisín is only a gathering place for dust, and my advice to you is to close it up entirely. The stonemason was dressing down a square flag for the mouth of the cubbyhole, and, while his back was turned, what did Gortine do? Only bury his gold ball in a lump of mortar and hid it in the back of the hole.
Oh, the sneaky oak.
Wasn't he deep? As the old woman said, you'd ate a bag of salt before you'd know a carryman.
And bags of salt were big in those days. I've seen them myself. So, anyway, the stonemason placed the square flag in position and plastered it over to match existing walls. In a while's time, Gortine went out to the haggard for a bit of, personal business. There was no such thing as indoor plumbing in those times. When he had his business done anyway, he turned to make his way back down the path, and what did he see there only? You guessed it, there's one in every story, a beautiful young girl.
Oh.
He asked her who she was, and she said she was Mary O'Sullivan from the West to Kerry. You're a fair step from home, so to see. And he wanted to know what message she was running in that part of the world. I'm going in service, says she, to a big farmer below in Shanachie, but I'm afraid I'm going a bit off my road. You are, says Gortine. Do you know, being the cute Kerry man I told you, do you know, I'm very short-handed here in this house, and if you'll come working to me, I'll give you the same wages you're expecting below in Shanachie. The one in other words said, and no better woman ever put her hand inside a man's door. Oh, to bake, to boil, to wash, to sew. She left the mark of her hand in that house, and indeed it needed it, no more than my own. This was all before Germaine Greer now, this was all. But there was one thing, if Gortine ever came in unexpected from the fields, he'd always find her rummaging on the top of the dresser.
along the thatch or behind the bin. And here she was one day, and she above in the attic with the tin trunk thrown sideways, and she going through the contents. And wasn't it funny that Gurteen didn't think of what we were thinking of? He did not. And you know why? He had something else on his mind.
Oh.
Shrove time came.
Devil.
Exactly. Wait till you hear. Shrove time came. That was when people got married long ago, because you couldn't get married in Lent. The church wouldn't allow that. Shrove time came, and you know, it was younger Gurteen was getting. And there wasn't a day passed that he didn't peg on a collar and tie. A thing that was never known to happen. One day they were sitting talking by the fire, and Gurteen said, "Well, no, Mary, you can't help but know the extent of my property here. And it isn't like another place. You'll have no relations to be dealing with. So, will you marry me?" "Not at the moment," she said. "Not at the moment." And placing her hand that way down his shoulder, she said, "You must have patience. That's what you must have."
Wise woman.
And did you notice that was the old Irish way of love and matrimony? No mention of the word love at all now, just property and relations.
Yeah.
Oh, but anyway, Gurteen curled his tongue, though it was hard for him, and reaching above him for his fiddle, he played to her a tune. And Madden in ye shadiarcus and stura colleen. Her limbs were complete and she nately clothed in green. Amala boquelis a baleen boro village fee. And he knew by her gazing that she'd played a hide and go seek. Faith then, she remained on in the house with him after that. And anyone staying in that place and keeping their two eyes open could see that she was still searching. She went from the house into the out offices, and from the out offices into the open, and every loose stone she turned. Even the rusty bucket with the dock leaf growing up through the broken bottom, didn't she kick that sideways to see what was under it?
Saucy thing.
She tried every hole and corner, and as the days lengthened out into spring, the colour left her cheeks, and she pined away, till she was only a bare shadow of the girl that stood in the haggard the June before. Everything that could be done was done, but, in spite of all, she died. Gurteen waked her the same as if she was one of his own, and in old-fashioned wakes at that time, the corpse would be laid out, up on the kitchen table, where else? The wake would last for 3 whole days, and every night the house would be full. The first night anyway, coming up to 12 o'clock, what did they hear only? The saddle horse galloping in the yard outside. The door burst open, and in walked a tall man of pale appearance. He walked up and stood over the corpse and said, "Of Irish Rodu the Vialorga gut," meaning, "Did you get that thing you were searching for?" "I did not a sign of it," she said.
The corpse.
The corpse, and fell back dead.
Ooh.
Cold sweat stood out on every forehead as the stranger went out the door. I'm telling you, nobody went home after the rosary that night. They held on, and when dawn broke, they were so drowsy and upset that they taught us how they dreamt it. And Trí de Céile, of course.
Yeah, had a few, yeah.
But when the same thing happened the second night, the men put their heads together. And one of them was for going with first light down to the presbytery, to the PP. "The wrong move," says Gurteen, "the wrong move. For all that will come out of that is another sermon about drink at wakes. And it could happen." "What'll we do so," says they. "Here we have a riddle that we can't unravel." "Well, now," says Gurteen, "Malachy Dunn is known to every one of you here. From his talks with the old people, he can't but have an inkling into things. He was a long way on the road to ordination, and it's said that he could light a candle on the altar simply by reading." Oh my God. Malachy Donald was seen the next day, and he said, "I'll be along to that wake tonight." Free drink and snuff, of course.
Oh, yes.
Why wouldn't they come? Yeah. So came the night, and there he was sitting amongst the men in the kitchen. When, coming up to 12 o'clock, they heard the horse galloping, the door burst open, and in walked the same tall, dark man of the 3 nights previous. He walked up and stood over the corpse, and he said, "Did you get that thing you were searching for?" "I did not a sign of it," she said, and fell back dead. The stranger moved to go. "Now, lads," says Malachi Dornan, and like that he was between the stranger and the door, and holding up his hand, his right hand, the right hand of power. He said, "I command you to give an account of the commotion you've created in this house for the last 3 nights running." The stranger looked around the kitchen and he said, "I was only waiting for someone to ask me that. I'm not one of ye. I'm from the other world. Our game there was hurling and we played it in that field down below. But we've no game now. Because of that girl. Her job was to stand on the sideline and watch the ball going wide. But she neglected her duty and lost our golden ball. And there'll be no peace in this house until we get it." "Where's the ball hammer?" says Gertine, racing around the kitchen. He found it, and smashing in the flag, he took out the golden ball and threw it to the stranger. He rubbed the moisture off it on the sleeve of his coat until it glittered. "Ha ha," he says, "this is it, our hurling ball." And motioning to the dead girl, he said, "Come on now, we'll be going." "You're going," says Malachi, "but she's not. Or do you mean to stand there and tell these innocent people that any girl that stayed so long in this house, where she was every day in contact with the fire, is one of ye? Isn't she a changeling?" "She is, of course," says the stranger, "so we have to have a go-between." "Well," says Malachi, "I command you to clean the cloud from her brain and to restore her to her health and former beauty. Right now." The Joey man's face blackened with the tint of bad stuff. He wasn't a bit happy. But, muttering some words, he made a magic pass in the air with his thumb, and the house was full of light. There was a crash like thunder, and like that, the dead girl hopped off the table and stood there every bit as beautiful as she had been in the haggard the June before. The stranger was gone, for they heard the horse knocking sparks out of the flags in the yard outside. Gertine was the first one over to the dead girl's side, and taking her by the hand, he said, "Well, now, Mary, you're a free woman now, and so I suppose you'll go back to your own people. Why, then the two of us were happy here in this house for a while, and I made bold to ask you a certain thing one time when you were under the spell." "Ask me again," says she, "and see what'll I say." He asked her again, and she said she would. And what began as a wake ended up as a wedding. There was gaiety where grieving was, singing where queening was, music where mourning was, and the rafters rang until the sun peeped in the window. That's my story, and if there's a lie in it, it wasn't I put it there.
That's lovely.
Oh, wow. Do you know what? I could see myself in the old kitchens years ago, you know, the old cottages.
Yeah.
And this house had one. My great-grandmother's house.
Right.
The big old fireplace, you could stand up in it.
Yeah, yeah.
And there'd always be, of course, the little chairs in by the fire and the wheel and all the rest to get the flames going.
Like Mill Street.
Yes.
Beautiful.
And it must have been so transfixing for people.
Oh, no. It was amazing.
Do you know,
and if you think about it as well, too, at the time those stories originally would have been told, like Emma Kelly collected that story.
Yes.
So that's much older, like than Emma Kelly, obviously.
Yeah.
Emma Kelly's dead for years, but it's maybe 200 years old, maybe 300 years old.
Yeah.
But at the time that would have been told, there'd be no electric light.
Yeah.
There might be only candles and gas lamps.
Yeah.
And so you have the atmosphere straight away for a story like that.
Yes.
And talking about ghosts coming in and fairies. And
you could imagine them going home then and seeing like a shift of the clouds across the moon and and there was something coming to the puka was going to come and get them. That's what gave rise probably to the banshee from those stories.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Interesting what you were saying there, Joe, as well, about things were committed to memory because people didn't, I suppose, you know, you had the scholars who could write, but your average person couldn't read or write. So the spoken word became more important and probably became more embellished as it went from area to area.
And I think one of the great things about Ireland, above all other places on earth maybe, is the love and respect for the word, just the word. But especially the spoken word, because as I said, even go back further to what you're talking about now,
there was a time when people were poor, they couldn't afford a proper education because of the English domination as well. They weren't allowed to get a proper education, except they went to a head school, But often people couldn't read or write, but even if they could, they couldn't afford books anyway.
Yeah.
And they were hard to come by in those days. Like there's all the libraries that there is now. But it's more important than that, because going back maybe 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, the Celts were one of the invasions that came in, of the many invasions that came into Ireland. And the Celts actually did have, and all the scholars agree on this, that there was a ban on them writing down their own language. And this is why they were called Celts.
What would that language have looked like or sounded like? Is it recorded anywhere in history?
And the great thing about Ireland is that we are one of, I think, only 6 countries, but reasonably smaller countries too as well. Like maybe Brittany, well, it's not a country itself, but we say Brittany and Cornwall and the Isle
and Wales
and the Isle of Man, and I was even the best to last. Scotland, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland.
Yeah,
as being the best. So, and the scholars say that only those 6 places, they're the only 6 places in the world that the Celtic language is still spoken. But it's not like the Hittite language or whatever. No, they have to guess what it is. Irish is still a Celtic language and still based, and it's actually been spoken for at least 3,000 years in a continuous line, which is very unusual because all across Europe, all the other languages were all wiped out by, of course, Latin.
Yeah.
But also by the Goths and the Vandals and the Alans and the Huns, like there's all the separate languages, including the Celtic languages, like in Gaul.
Yeah.
In Gallia Est, like Gaul actually was a Celtic country as well. But the Gaulish language was actually destroyed. But it was a Celtic language as well. And all these Celtic languages are all related. And how you know that is, and it's extended as far as Turkey, right?
Yeah.
And how they're so sure of that is that there's an area in Turkey, and we know this from the letters of St. Paul's letter to the Galatians. There's a place in the centre of Turkey called Galatia.
Of course.
Yeah.
And there's a place in northern Spain called Galicia.
Yes.
And up in Scotland you have Gaelic, and in Ireland you have Gaelic. That's the same word.
Yes.
And
They're all cognate, as they say.
And the French name for Wales is Pays de Galles.
Pays de Galles.
And it's all connected, isn't it? Because the Welsh initially came from that northern Italian, mid-Europe part of the world,
Yeah.
Well, Joe, we've been talking about storytelling and the tradition, the Shanachie tradition, and of course, as well as the storytelling element and literature, and you just did a lovely piece for us there. I know that singing, song, music is something that's very, very close to your heart. And I actually looked at a piece, an interview you did with Joe Bell. I had to listen to it. And you gave a lovely, painted a beautiful picture, actually, of when you were a young fella and you'd come out to ring with your dad because he'd go swimming off Helvig. And you called into, it would have been my great
Henny Cody's baby.
Grand-aunt, actually,
Yeah.
Henny Cody, Siobhan Nichodas,
Yeah, that's what we called
as it
it
was
at
at the time, Henny Cody. And it was a little old thatch pub, and we've referred to it a number of times in Clancy's Kitchen.
Yeah.
But you painted a really good scene as a little boy looking on at this scene, and where you're something in that in the time that you spent there resonated with you.
Yeah.
And it was Nicholas Tobin.
Yeah.
And he was singing a shanachie song.
Yeah.
And the way I loved how you described it, you said he put his hand against the wall.
Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah.
And I never would have thought of this before.
No.
You think that's just a pose,
Yeah.
But as you said, it actually would almost help him keep in pitch maybe as well,
No.
above the noise of the pub and everything else. And you said there was something in that, the storytelling element maybe.
Yeah.
In a shanachie song, something struck a chord with you there that stayed with you.
Yeah.
Is that true to say?
No, but it was also how subtle he was. Like, Ewan MacColl is often portrayed in pictures now. You often see pictures of him with his hand over his ear or his finger in his ear,
Yes.
and I hear loads of derogatory comments about folk singers in England, in particular, after Ewan MacColl, and they're called the Finger in the Ear Brigade. So it's a good way of mocking people as well. So, but like, I mean, now he might have heard that because he was in England for, I don't know, 10 years, I think.
Yeah.
And so he actually didn't want to be seen as being pretentious, like.
Right.
And as kind of innocent a man as he was very clever, very clever. He was a genius, basically. And so,
Claus Tobin now.
oh, totally, yeah. A total genius. If ever I encountered one, total genius. And so, because even if you listen to the ornamentation he does, it's really subtle, and like a composer wouldn't even come up with it. But he went inside the counter because it was very packed, and because it was packed and it was a small place, as you know, it was a kind of a glorified shebeen, if you don't mind me saying.
Well, I don't remember it, but yeah.
But so it was very small, very packed.
Yeah.
I remember holding on to my father's hand like this, and I could see there was people all around me, like a forest.
All men probably.
Yeah,
in
all
pubs
men,
back then.
like a forest. And I heard someone saying, and as I say, like I was a kid, so I should have been impressed by the day at the seaside, but I can't remember one instant of that.
So wasn't the ice cream
because
or whatever?
I was eating ice cream, I was playing on the beach, but I remember someone saying in the pub afterwards, it's imprinted in my brain. I can see it, and I can feel myself there now.
Yes.
And Big Tobin for a song, and because it was so crowded, he went inside the bar. Imagine, inside the bar, and walked up to the very top of the inside of the bar, up to the wall, and actually, I pretended he was leaning on the wall like this, and you can all try this at home. Like an awful lot of people put their fingers in their ear, and you can hear a kind of resonation.
Yeah, that's right.
Inside your brain, but that's not your real sound at all. So, like because it's too much. What's that they call it? Vibrato or whatever it is.
Yes,
No.
yeah.
Too much.
Yeah, vibrato. Yeah,
Yeah, quite vibrato,
What's the word to use in recording?
Oh, you're probably thinking of reverb.
Reverb, yeah.
Okay.
So, but like it doesn't make you. It kind of echoes in your head a bit, and so you actually can't hear yourself as clear. But like the real thing to do, and this is exactly what he did, because I actually noticed. I never forgot what he did. Is that you sing into your hand,
and you can hear yourself.
right? And it's like a monitor then, because the sound is funneled up your hand directly into your ear,
Back into your ear.
and it excludes all other voices and all other sound. And so, even if the room is crowded, you can hear yourself perfectly, and if you're in tune. And so
It's the original monitoring.
It is
Like today we have little
monitor.
speakers.
It's a monitor, and it's
It
very
cuts the
effective.
sound into your ear, even if there's noise all around.
I use it. I use it as lately as how many days ago was that? Last Thursday in the Marine. No, 3 days ago. Because there was people talking up in the top side, and they were putting me off, and like I couldn't hear myself. But I used that, and immediately it's like being in the studio now.
It actually works. We got to try that next
Oh, no,
time
no.
for a session.
Hey, just try it, like as you're talking. It amplifies your voice.
It absolutely does.
Yeah,
Wow,
it's
even when you
amazing.
talk,
It's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what he did. And like I can be leaning against the wall like this, and he was cupping his hand over his ear,
Yeah.
And he sang the song. And at the time, I wasn't into the Irish language. I wasn't into shanachie singing, so I can't even tell you what song he sang. But I remember that it put shivers down my spine. I mean, I started crying now thinking about it. I was so moved
It was
by it.
the passion in
But
it.
it changed my whole life. I was only about 8 or 10 maybe. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but it changed my whole life. I was obsessed with singing and actually listened to singing for the whole rest of my life.
Yeah.
No, I didn't sing in public for ages after that because obviously like it's too big a step, you know.
Yeah. But doesn't that really say something, Joe, that for a young boy as you were at the time, you know, and as you say yourself, it wasn't the day at the beach and kicking the ball or the ice cream.
No.
Like something stopped you in your tracks.
It did, yeah.
When you heard.
And I always say as well, like that all my friends were probably into Elvis or the Beatles or the Rolling Stones.
Yes.
But I was at the Claus Tobin, like, which was just straight away you're in there in the heart of the Irish tradition, and I never really left that. Even though I love every other kind of music, like jazz, classical, opera, everything.
Yeah.
But especially the human voice, but everything. I love every kind of music. I love Public Enemy. I love rap even.
Yeah.
So
and that awakened something in you, obviously.
it awakened the performer, the voice as the voice of power, and the soul speaking like through your lungs and through your voice and through your vocal cords.
Yeah.
I never experienced anything like it since then. Even now, if I hear old recordings of Close to Being, he's by far the best singer I've ever heard. And I've listened to Pavarotti, and I've listened to Gigli and Tito Schipa and all these guys.
Because it was natural, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was
natural.
pure. It came from
And it came
the
from his
soul.
heart. It came from his heart.
Yes.
And I always said I was often trying to describe, because I'd be going on and on and on. To people like John Gaisley, I'd be going on about music, and every now and again he'd say, "Joe, boy, 'tis only music. 'Tis only music." And I was trying to explain it's more than music, because it's like it's a voice coming from your soul. It's like I'm obsessed with Carl Jung as well. It's like your actual anima. I'm singing to you. It's like your deepest unconscious, and as I said about the archetypes, like it's coming from somewhere that you don't even know where it's coming from,
Where it's even coming from.
like even why it's affecting you so much.
Yeah. Because you weren't brought up in a household necessarily,
that's the
Joe,
whole
where
point.
where your parents were singing or there was music
No.
around. Yeah, but
And so the way I describe it, I describe it in my book, is that it's just like I wasn't given any grounding in this, so it was as if I was isolated out here, and I finally got a plug, and I could plug into the national grid of Irishness and singing and culture and feeling and the language and the music. So it was exactly like hearing the Close to Being for the first time. It was just getting plugged in, basically.
That is so interesting, and I hadn't thought of this until now. And it just made me think of a few things. One, my father, when he sang, used to almost go into you remember my father?
I remember your father. He loved his singing.
It was almost like into a trance.
Yeah.
Right?
I had him as a guest in the Singers Club. Do you remember that?
I did, yeah. And that was a lovely night, you know.
And I think he enjoyed it anyway himself.
Oh, he did,
But I just so loved that night. That was amazing. That was so unique. It was so wonderful.
And another thing, there's something about the idea of the elders, and it's not to be glib or overtly romantic about it, but I remember when Anne Mooney used to be around this kitchen table, that our middle daughter, Kiva, would always come up from the lounge and sit and listen.
Yeah.
And there's something about that, listening to the old, not just the old stories, but the way they're told. And there's a hand down of something. As you said, it's not easy to put your finger on it. There's something in the ether of someone telling a story or singing a song in a certain way.
No, I was actually just saying as recently as last night as well. Only last night I was saying that all over the world there's a thing in the tribal cultures, the real old cultures, and in China, it actually still happens in China, but there's a thing called ancestor worship, and they say that in the West now this is going away because up until maybe even just the last generation, like maybe like at the time of my childhood, often the man and the woman would actually begin to go out to work, both of them, right? Up to then it was always the woman stayed at home, and so she took care of the children. But like gradually then in the 60s, both sexes went out to work with feminism, whatever. But then what happened was that the children were often taken care of by the grandparents.
Yeah.
And so apparently this is what happens in the tribal cultures in Africa, because the parents are hunting and gathering, and they're only barely subsisting, so they have to hunt or gather all the time. So the parents are busy, but the children, and of course there's no contraception, so there might be 12 children, there might be 20 children, but they're all brought up by the elders, by the grandparents. And so all the old stories get passed on, the old songs get passed on, the traditions get passed on, the history get passed on, and it skips a generation nearly. But in each case, it skips a generation. But it's great continuity then.
Yeah.
Because
it's so interesting, isn't it, when you start to think about it?
Yeah.
You know, and there's something, you hit an age where these things possibly resonate more or have more of an importance to you personally. But I always remember Kiva reacting to Anne Mooney's
That was lovely.
way of telling a story,
Yeah.
that she just gravitate towards the table.
You're right, and Kiva in turn is a great storyteller now herself, isn't she?
Yeah,
She's
she
known amongst her
is.
friends as being a great storyteller.
No, but it's the same with me, in that like the story we're actually telling already here. That's exactly what happened. Is that as I said, I was plugging into the national grid, but it was like Nick Close to Being was actually my grandfather, like, because my father didn't sing, or didn't have the Irish language, or my mother didn't sing. She didn't have the Irish language, even though she loved music, and they're all very intelligent, and they gave me a good upbringing, but they weren't able to pass on that stuff to me in the way that Nick Close to Being did. Immediately, the first time he sang, I didn't even know I was in the audience. Like, isn't that brilliant? That you can make that connection. You can actually, it's like the old electricity. And the electricity actually jumps a gap, like there's a spark.
Yeah.
And you can actually jump a gap, and immediately you're there. Like the connection is made.
Do you know what I'm thinking now as you're talking? And it's a shame in some ways because, I would have spent a lot of time as a child in and around Mooney's pub. Now, that might sound like a strange thing to people today to hear. Why would a child be hanging around a pub? I suppose it was my grandmother's pub.
Yeah.
But also, it wasn't all about the drinking.
Yeah.
It was a gathering of people. It was a sharing of something. And all generations would be there. And as you say, the younger generations would just take in or absorb without even, it was like osmosis. They didn't know.
Osmosis is a great word.
They were absorbing culture.
Yeah.
Talk, stories, singing.
Yeah.
Joe,
And I think-
I'd love to, sorry, Ryland,
I just want to say there's something about the rhythm as well. In Shakespeare you have the iambic, which is the heartbeat. And I think that is passed on. Like the way people speak in
The
rhythms in
of
certain
speech.
areas.
Yeah.
West Wales has a certain rhythm.
Yeah.
And it's just in you,
But that's what I was saying earlier, just to tie in with that earlier thing, is that as I say, a particular storyteller attacked me one time. He said, I know you got that story from Amy Kelly, but you should do it in your own voice. And I said, but if I do it in my own voice, I mean, I can tell my own story in my own voice. But when I'm telling that story, to me, I actually wrote or actually learned that story at the time when I was learning songs. So I thought of it as another song. So, and I often say, and it's true as well, you could actually annotate it if you're writing down on a sheet of music, like, there was this man one time living in the townland of
So
Lyre,
you say the
and
iambic
his name was
pentameter.
Gertine.
Well, the iambic has a feminine and a masculine ending.
Exactly.
And people say, well, I'll tell you now, I would da 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 da.
Yeah.
And then there's a payoff. But the man came round and then
Yeah.
da da da.
And
that
the
makes
way
sense.
we speak, like in English, as Irish people, I always think it's so derivative of the Irish language itself.
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly.
The rhythms of it and the way, the placement of verb. Even. And there he was, and he's sitting there, and telling a story.
I've the best.
And even dogs react to it, by the way.
But I've the best illustration of like this shows that this is all not planned.
Yeah.
It's just purely a Joe Power conversation. Everything goes around in circles. But but I have the perfect illustration of that, and I'll give it to you. Even though you might have to cut it out afterwards, whatever. But this is the best indication of that ever. And I'm obsessed with Shakespeare, like, but I try to keep this Irish today. So there's one guy that I always call the Irish Shakespeare, and he really is the Irish Shakespeare. He's the one that came closest to expressing everything you said about iambic pentameter and musicality in words, and expressing the persona of the people of his country, and the same way Shakespeare did, and that's John Millington Synge. So I'll do this piece.
Playboy of the Western world.
Yeah. So I'll do this piece that I put together from the Playboy. I'm very proud of this because I put this together as a monologue. This is part of dialogue now. But I actually edited it out and made a monologue out of it. And I think it actually illustrates better than anything else how the whole Irish personality, and as I said earlier, the love of words and the love of Blarney and honey talk. This is why my book is called Honey Talk. This is the perfect example of honey talk in English. And Singh himself said in his diaries, which I read again lately, his diaries from the Iron Island, that all he was doing was, and he was accused of being stage Irish, but all he was doing was actually trying to get the usage of the Iron Islanders Irish and translate it directly into English. And so this is why the poetry is there, because it's the poetry of the Irish language, but it's in a different language. And it's accessible, but it's actually wonderful.
Yeah.
I think this piece by John Millington Synge from the play by the Western World totally expresses the Irish personality, the love of words, the love of language, the love of poetry, romancing, but also kind of a shy, maybe timid. Often the Irish were kept down. Well, not often, they were always kept down. But the pride always shone through in their love of language. So I think this is expressed by Christy Mahan's speech here. I've told my story no place till this night, Peggy and Mike. And 'tis foolish I was here, maybe, to be talking free. But you're good people, I'm thinking. And yourself, a kindly woman, the way I wasn't fearing you at all. I've said it nowhere till this night, I'm telling you, for I've seen none the like of you. The 11 long days I'm walking the world, looking over a low ditch or a high ditch to my north or south, into stony scattered fields or scribes of bog, where you'd see young limber girls and fine prancing women making laughter with the men. Up to the day I killed my father, there wasn't a person in Ireland knew the kind I was. And I there, walking, waking, eating, sleeping, drinking, a quite simple poor fella, with no man paying me heed. Not the girls themselves, I won't tell you a lie. There wasn't anyone heeding me in that place, saving only the dumb beasts of the field. And I, after toiling and miling, digging and dodging from dawn till dusk, without a sight of sport or joy, saving only when I be away in the darkness of the night, poaching rabbits on hills. For I was the devil to poach, God forgive me. And then I got 6 months for going with a dung fork and stabbing a fish. I did, God help me. And there I'd be, as happy as the sunshine on St. Martin's Day, watching the light passing the north, or the patches of fog, until I'd hear a rabbit starting to screech, and I'd go running in the furze. And when I had my full share, I'd come walking down to where you'd see the ducks and geese stretched sleeping on the highway of the roads, until I'd hear himself snoring out, a loud lonesome snore he'd be making all times the while he was sleeping, and he might be raging all the times the while he was waking, like the gaudy officer you'd hear cursing and damning and swearing oaths. If you seen him, and he after drinking for weeks, rising up in the red dawn, or before it maybe, and going out into the yard, as naked as an ash tree in the moon of May, shying clods against the visage of the stars, until he'd put the fear of death into the bonnies and the screeching sows. He had sons and daughters walking all great states and territories of the world, and not one of them, to this day, but would say there's 7 curses on him, and they're rousing up to let a cough or a sneeze maybe in the deadness of the night. And he, man, gave peace to no person, except when you get 2 months or 3, or be locked in the asylums for battering peelers and assaulting men. And 'twas a bitter life he led me, until I did up a Tuesday and have his skull. Till I did up a Tuesday and have his skull. Isn't it great?
Oh, isn't it lovely?
The language in that, eh?
Can I just say, what's amazing is I've heard you recite a lot in pubs, and it's great. But there's something so resonating in the silence of a kitchen.
Oh,
and
yeah,
hearing
it's true,
words.
yeah.
It's really nice.
And that's what's great about Clancy's Kitchen and about these kinds of places. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're sacred places, really.
They are.
And as you know, the Romans believed that as well. And the heart, the road is God's and goddesses of the heart. So the heart is the centre of the house and it's the centre of the household. And it's where everything centres, basically, everything.
Yeah.
Joe, that was lovely. Absolutely lovely.
No, like the other reason I like doing that is that, in my opinion, sing is overlooked now completely for some reason. I mean, every amateur drama organisation, company around the world or just around the country are doing John B. Keane, and John B. Keane is great, but he's only a down market sing, really.
Yes.
And like, I mean, he's trying to be sing, and but there's not enough of but like the rhythm and Well of the Saints and all those, and the Play by the Western World and Riders to Sea. These are all our classics. And as I say, he is, if anyone has a claim to be the Irish Shakespeare, he is it. Like, because
but apart from the language, I mean, he was very brave as well, because of course there were riots.
Totally,
weren't there?
yeah.
Well, because he did slay his dad. That was the whole thing. That, how can we put on a play about a man who murdered his father? I mean, that was unheard of.
I know,
to put that on as in Ireland at the time. But as you say, Shakespeare. I mean, sure, Shakespeare's full of, they all murder each other in the end more often than not, don't they?
but like he was unafraid at a time when Irish Catholic Ireland was so repressed, and Joyce said the same thing at the same time exactly.
Yes,
he left Ireland for the same reason.
Yeah.
What was the phrase he used? Paralysis. It was paralysed.
Yes.
But at the same time, saying he wasn't afraid to access the dark side and to show all the sides of humanity, like, you know.
Absolutely.
And but even in the play, and the fact that they think this is a great thing that they killed his father, like, it's a joke in a sense, but it's also...
It was kind of a send-up, but at the same time...
At the same time, it's a glorification of heroism and standing up for your rights and all the stuff that they're on about now, like, about everyone... Everyone has the right to be their own person, like, you know what I mean? And so, but at the time, as I said about, even in the Eamon Kelly story as well too, like in a century previous to this, no one could choose their partners who they got married to.
No.
They were made to go to church all the time if they believed or not, and they were made to marry a certain person and stay married for years, even though they were getting beaten around the place and everything. But like all this stuff, nobody was actually talking about it.
Total oppression.
In the way that at the same time Ibsen was in
Sweden.
Yeah, and Strindberg and all these people.
Yeah.
You know.
Joe, God, we could really give hours and hours to this, couldn't we? I mean, you're
really
going to have to come back some more. No, it's all so fascinating. But we really want to hear you sing as well. And for, I mean, that beautiful story you gave about how struck you were on hearing the Clás Thubín sing, and, you know, that it awakens something in you. And as we say, you've been running the Singers Club, started it and have kept it going through hell, rain and high water, rain, hail or shine, every Wednesday since. What would you sing for us?
But I'd like to try and sing my favourite song of all time in Ireland. I always call it an Irish arts song, because and there were Irish arts songs in the at the turn of the last century. You know, like She Moved to the Fair was actually written by Patrick Colum, and it was arranged by Herbert Hughes for piano and sopranos, and Danny Boy became a kind of a staple. But I think if you go back further, the real Irish arts song was The Wounded Hussar, in the sense that I'd be a big fan of Schubert now, but also of Schumann and Beethoven, Adelaide and all that. So, but all these art songs, so called, that Beethoven as in Adelaide and Schubert as in the Lindenbaum and all that, and all the songs they sung or they wrote were normally had poetry by famous poets like Goethe and Rilke and Schiller, and so like basically, my definition of an art song is a song that's written by one of the greatest composers of the time and one of the greatest poets of the time. So, one of the greatest composers in Ireland, I think, ever, probably was opposite Turlough Carlin. But because of the English domination, he was never given a chance to get a proper education, so he didn't go to university. He was blind, so he eventually had to bum, like he was a hobo, basically, you know, or a busker.
Yeah.
So he went from house to house, big house to big house.
Just sing for his supper.
Exactly, looking for patronage, and he was like often led by a boy, and he was up on a horse or whatever, and the boy was leading the horse because he was blind, but he'd have his harp with him, and so he composed all these tunes for the big houses. But as I always say, most of the big houses were English landlords again, or Anglo-Irish, and so they were up and down to Dublin all the time, and they were listening to Gimignani, who was a famous Italian Baroque composer who was living in Dublin at the time. And Corelli visited a few times and played there. And of course Handel came over and did the Messiah. So all these famous Baroque composers were actually known and loved in Dublin and all through the country in the big houses. So that there was a lot of pressure on Carolyn to try and ape these guys and be as good as they compete. Wow. Yeah. And so, and his tunes are lovely, like, and there's an Irishness about them, but they're very Baroque. But I think his very best tunes, are the two Bridge of Cruises. There might even be three Bridge of Cruises, but there's two pieces he dedicated to Bridget Cruise and one to Eleanor Plunkett, and it was obvious as well, even though I think it's officially declared like that he was in love with these people, a woman, obviously. So I prefer these pieces because they're more Irish and more natural to him. Yeah. He's not trying to be Italian. Okay. So, and also one of his greatest pieces is O'Carolyn's Farewell to Music, which he wrote when he was on his deathbed, because again he didn't have to impress anybody. So I think it's a shame. It's a shame, like, that he wasn't allowed to express his Irishness more. But I think he really does on this melody that I'm talking about here now. Okay. I think it was originally maybe dedicated to Captain O'Kane or something like that, because they were all dedications, you know, Clancy Davis and Clancy Irwin and all this. So, but anyway, fortunately, a poet in Scotland called Thomas Campbell, who had written The Exile of Erin, because Irish songs were very popular at the time. So he wrote The Exile of Erin, even though I don't think he'd ever been in Ireland, although I might be wrong by that, but he was a famous poet anyway. So he composed words to go to the melody, and the final song then is called The Wounded Hussar. Because
it won't say the title of it again. The
Wounded Hussar, because it came out around the time of the Napoleonic Wars. Yes. So a hussar is a particular kind of soldier, that a Hungarian soldier or something like that. Okay. So the Wounded Hussar is about a soldier that dies on the battlefield, and his girlfriend actually finds him dying. So it's my favourite song because it's got beautiful words, really good lyrics, and they really fit the melody. But because the melody is actually sublime. And before you judge me too harshly, it is probably the hardest song in my whole repertoire to sing, because and the way I explain that is that it was originally a tune on the harp, so it was never meant to be sung originally. Or maybe it was, but either way, he'd be trying to impress someone inside in a big house. So if you're playing a harp, you have a whole fingerboard here. Yes. So you have to be seen to be using all of it, like. Yes. So obviously it goes from the lowest up to the highest notes.
Okay. He was trying to impress her in a big way.
Right. and so the...
give us it'll speak for itself.
Yeah, it'll speak for itself in the sense that you can see how the high notes are very high and the low notes are very low. And again, it equates to the art songs of Beethoven, like Adelaide, which are intended for a trained voice to sing. Right. And needless to say, my voice is not trained.
Nobody's judging you here. Ryland might accompany a little bit on the...
I might on the second...
You haven't heard this ever, but...
Well, I think I've heard Joe do it, but we'll see how it goes.
No, but even even before the harmonica comes out, I see how beautiful melody this is. It's actually my favourite Irish melody of all time. Alone to the banks of the dark rolling Danube, fair Adelaide did roam when the battle was o'er. Oh, where then she's cried, have you wandered, my true love? Or where do you wither and bleed by the shore? She's travelled a while, the tears her eyes flooded, through the dead and the dying she walked near and far, till she found by the river all battered and bloody, by the light of the moon, her poor wounded hussar. From his bosom that heaved, the last torrent was streaming, and pale was his visage, deep marked with a scar, and dim was the eye once expressively beaming, that had melted in love, or had kindled and warmed. How sad was fair Adelaide's heart at the sight, how bitterly she wept o'er this victim of war. Have you come then, he's cried, this last sorrowful night, for to cheer the loved heart of your poor wounded hussar. Thou shalt live then, she's cried, heaven's mercy relieving, and each anguishing wound shall forbid me to mourn. Ah, no, he's replied, for my life is fast fading, and no light from the moon shall to poor Henry return. Thou charmer of life, ever tender and true, fetch my love unto my babes, who await me afar. Penny's faltering tongue could scarce bid her adieu, when he died in her arms, our poor wounded hussar.
Lovely. All in.
Oh, there was a bit of everything in there, really, wasn't there? Catch your breath, Joe. Wow.
That was magical.
It was absolutely lovely. God, you really felt, I could see that, the little boy in you looking up and taking in.
But that's all.
Passion.
All the thanks are due to Andy Clusterbean for everything. Really, because that love of singing that just came directly from him.
Yeah, I can sense that from you.
And as I was going to say earlier, but I got sidetracked as usual. Often people used to ask me, why are you always on about Nick Clusterbean? What particularly had he, amongst other singers? There's loads of other great voices, and I was trying to put my finger on it, and I just came up with it one day. It was just two. I just said two words. He was just singing.
Yes. Yeah.
He had no idea how good he was. Or he didn't care. He didn't care if people liked him or not. He just got up and sang, but he sang from his heart, and he was just expressing himself in a way that he knew how to do it, and he wanted to do it. But he wasn't trying to impress anyone, or he wasn't trying to prove anything, and he had no agenda whatsoever. But I knew this from actually seeing him. Obviously, I've seen him singing, and I've heard him singing, but there's very few people that you can say that about, because they're always putting on a performance, or they're trying to impress someone, or they're showing off, or they're,
It was like who he was.
But he was just singing.
Yeah.
and
There's something to that, isn't there?
sublimely as well, you know, because he kind of lost all self-consciousness and all, even consciousness. Like even go back to young again, he was singing from his unconscious, basically.
Yeah.
He was actually singing from it deep, from deep within himself.
It's spiritual, as you say. There's something spiritual within it.
Something very spiritual.
Yeah. Well, you didn't do too badly yourself there, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Now, your book, Honey, hold it up there, Joe.
Oh, yeah.
Or if you give it to me, I'll hold it up to the camera there. So, Joe Power, Honey Talk Before Strangers.
Very
You'll
good.
have to explain the title to us.
Yeah,
and
I'm
where
going to
it
explain
came
the
from.
title now.
And there's a lovely picture of yourself.
Beautiful picture by
on the front there.
Des Dillon, an absolute genius as well. A friend of mine. He captured me beautifully on the cover.
Yes,
Really.
yeah.
Des Dillon, an absolute genius as well.
Yeah.
But I'm going to explain the title in a second. But I just have to say that it's an amazing feeling to have something to leave after me. I was just saying to you earlier on, you know, like after I'm dead, like all the time, all the sessions I organised and all the singles clubs and all the times I sang and all the times I performed, there's no record of any of them, you know. So after I'm gone, I'm completely gone. But at least now, you know, there's this here, you know, because there's 2 CDs on the back of it as well, of my singing and of my recitations and stuff. And I still play my me even beyond there. I can't even remember. But anyway,
Can I ask where, if any of our listeners here could get hold of a copy?
from me basically at the moment because I just did it in small lots because I'm so humble, as you can hear. Like, so I didn't think there'd be huge demand for it. So I just bought all 100 for the launch, and all 100 were actually sold on the day of the launch. Imagine that.
Perfect.
So where would people, if they wanted to get a copy then, Joe, have you an email address or a...
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah,
If people messaged us
yeah, do yeah.
on www.clancyskitchen.com and you can go to the message box. If you send us a message, we'll pass the message on to Joe, and then we can organise a way for them to get a copy. Is that okay, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely
good
perfect.
plan.
And I just to say that the only reason I wrote it really is because COVID was on. There was nothing else to do, so I was kind of forced
As
to
you
do it.
do, you write a book.
Yeah, and so as I was saying earlier, I know COVID did a lot of harm as well and a lot of kill people, but I just like to say a special thank you to COVID-19, please. Thanks very much. Because only few I wouldn't have the book out.
Yeah.
No, everyone's going to hate me for saying that, but what am I anyway?
No, but I mean, some every cloud is a silver lining,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
they
and
say.
you should turn everything to good advice or to good use. Yeah,
Yeah.
And
So, Joe, we'll have to start winding it down now.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming in.
no bother at all.
It's been absolutely lovely listening to your pieces, the renditions, and the
Right.
passion you have for all of this.
Yeah.
And you're talking there when you're gone. I hope it's not going to be for an awful long time yet, Joe. And we'll have many, many singer club sessions, please God, for years to come.
And just to say, I'd like to pay tribute to all the people who helped me on the book, which is, of course, Michael Ryan sponsored the original one. And so I'd like to thank him, and Benny McCarthy, who helped me, and Jamie O'Neill, who helped me an awful lot, and Donica, who gave me the opportunity of doing a launch down in the town hall during the Tune Fest.
That's Donica Goff.
Donica Goff in the local. And I'd also like to pay tribute to Donica in the local because of the reason that it's out again now. Because I was quite happy with the 2 editions, but there were still people asking me, hey, how will we get your book? And so I said, it's kind of hardly worth bringing out another 100 of them if only 5 of them are going to sell. But I'm only putting in this because it's actually funny. I don't think I had bought a copy of me of the original one, right? And it was up on the shelf down the local during a session the other night. And the woman was asking me about the book, so I took down Donica's copy and gave her a look at it. And so she said, "Oh my God, I get that if you bring it out again." So I still wasn't really. I had my mind made up. Like I received this last week, so I really had my mind made up. But after she went anyway, it was lying on the counter as the session was going on. So I just took it up and started reading it. So of course I made a show of myself because I started laughing at the jokes and everything, because I'd forgotten I'd made those jokes, you know what I mean? So they were all new, like, to me.
You know you're in trouble when you start laughing at your own
Yeah,
jokes.
and a few of the insights in it, I was saying, God, that's very clever. Because I'm so used to reading, you see. So, but I'd forgotten I should read the book, so I was enjoying it as if someone else had.
That's good, though.
Right,
That's
but
a
I was
really
caught.
nice thing.
But I was caught lovely because at a certain point I looked up and everybody was filming me on their phones, and so they were obviously sending off Joe Purperton to enjoy his own book or whatever.
Hey, listen,
Being the ego tripper.
there's no such thing as bad publicity, as they say. So may it sell well.
So anyway, the other thing that people always ask me is, because it's an obscure title, but I deliberately wanted a title that would stick in the memory or that would jump out. So Honey Talk Before Strangers comes from a piece of the Fíneacht that I do, and it's on the CDs at the back as well too. And I'm going to do it for you now as a parting shot. But it's from the 4th century AD, the old Irish mythology, which again originally was part of an oral tradition, but and of course luckily it was only saved because, of course, the bad part of an oral tradition is that nothing gets saved, like as I was saying about my own life. So lucky enough, all these stories were written down by the monks as soon as they came over, or as soon as they converted to Christianity, because it wasn't against their religion. So they write it down in Old Irish on the side of manuscripts and everything. So all this really priceless Irish mythology was actually saved. So this is part of the stories about Finn McCool and his men, which were called the Fianna, meaning deer, because they were hunters and they associated with their prey. So Finn McCool and the Fianna, and the stories are called the Fíneacht. And here's the story, and this explains the title of the book. And I've used this time and time again at sessions as a justification for a session and for what happens here in Clancy's kitchen. And you'll hear that as it goes on. Okay, this is an excerpt from the Old Irish stories of the Fíneacht, and translated, I think, by James Stevens. So, and it explains what we do at the sessions, and it also explains the title of my book. During a break in the hunt, the Fianna were talking of music, and a dispute arose as to what was the finest music in the world. The cuckoo calling from the tree that is highest in the hedge, says Róisín. A good sound, said Finn. And you, Oscar, what do you think is the best of music? The top of music, said Oscar, bar on Heol, is the ring of a spear on a shield. That is a good sound, said Finn, who was a warrior himself. They went around the whole group, and each one told what music he believed to be the finest. One said the belling of a stag over water, and another the baying of a tuneful pack of hounds heard off in the distance. And others believed the finest music to be the song of a lark, the whisper of a loved one, or the laughter of a girl. They are good sounds all, said Finn. Tell us, Chief, one of them ventured, what do you think? The finest music in the world, he said, is the music of what happens. The music of what happens. That is the finest music in the world. Finn loved what happened, and would not evade it by the swerve of a hair. Whatever was occurring, he would have it occur, whether it brought him good or ill. Whatever Finn could do, he did that. And whatever Finn could not do, he did that also. That was Finn. And another thing, Finn loved above all things to be in the company of his own people. Who has heard honey talk from Finn before strangers? Finn that is wind quick, Finn that is a bigger man than God. Or who has seen the like of Finn, or seen the living semblance of him standing in the world? Finn that could best God at ball throw, or wrestling, or pig trailing, or at the honeyed discourse of sweet Irish, with jewels and gold for bards, or at the listening of distant harpers in a black hole at evening. Or where in the world is that living human man who could beat Finn at the making of generous cheese, at the shaving of hog hair,
at the spearing of ganders, at the magic of thumbsuck, or at the unleashing of long hounds from the golden thong in the full chase. Sweet-fingered, corn-yellow Finn, the god-big Finn, that is his own father and his own son. Finn that is every hero from the crack of time. Finn that is too big to be trampled and twisted and tortured for the weaving of a book poet's scap-worded bookweb.
Hey. Joe Power of Dungarvan, County Waterford, you're a legend. Thank you so much for coming into Clancy's Kitchen.
No,
We
so
hope to
thank
see
you for having
here
me
again.
very much.
All right, thanks, Joe. Join us next time on Clancy's Kitchen. Slán go fóill. Thank you for joining us on Clancy's Kitchen. We hope you're really enjoying listening to the stories and listening to the songs. If you'd like to support us and make a donation, remember you can check us out on Patreon. That's www.patreon.com/Clancy's Kitchen. And that will help us to continue making podcasts. Go raibh míle maith agaibh.